All right. Welcome to Masterfully Integrated. We are, so we had to record this one because we're going to be away this Friday, but we normally are live every Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern. We'll be back next week. This one we're just doing a little bit early because we have some previously scheduled events. So I'm really excited about today. We're talking about chapters part 3 and 4 of the book Indistractible. And this is where he really gets into the hacks and how to, very actionable steps on how to make your environment more indistractable and how to be more indistractable, not just your environment, but really about technology and things like that. So if you're watching this, give us a hashtag replay, put your comments, questions, anything like that in the comments, and we'll be getting back to answer them as soon as we can. And again, we'll be back next week. So we appreciate you watching the recording. And again, we'll be live next week, 11 a.m. Eastern on Friday. So oh, go ahead.
I was saying, we're not just talking about it, we've been living it. So we've been being the guinea pigs on this.
So we're gonna talk about the different hacks that he recommends, and then we're gonna tell you what we've done personally to implement these in our lives. So I wanted to start with a quote that I thought was really interesting. So in the book, he says there was a study published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, Human Perception and Performance found that receiving a cell phone notification but not replying to it was just as distracting as responding to a message or call. So I thought this was really crazy because I thought I was cool by always having my phone on silent, so I wouldn't hear, like, there was no sound. I mean, it would vibrate, but then realizing that getting it, like, I would see it and then I'd put my phone down, but then I was thinking about the fact that I didn't respond to this person. And so that's actually more distracting, or not more, but as distracting as if you did actually respond to the call or message or whatever. So we're going to start, just kind of go down the list. So the first thing that he talks about is how to hack back work interruptions. So a lot of people are working from home right now. And so I'm sure that they are dealing with different kinds of interruptions than they would normally deal with if they worked, away from home. But either way, both places have, will have interruptions. And something he recommends, and it's actually in the back of the book that you can rip out, is a sign that says red light. I need to focus right now, but please come back soon. It's like in the book. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then he also shows a picture of his wife who has, she has this like little tiara that has like lights on it. And if she's wearing that, that means she doesn't want any distractions. So I thought that was kind of cool. For me, I live alone and I have a dog who he probably wouldn't even understand if I put a sign up, so it wouldn't matter. But for people who do have people that they live with, setting up some sort of notification like, hey, if I have this sign sitting here, or if I'm wearing this hat, or, if this sign is on the door, it means I don't want to be interrupted. I think is really important so that everyone's on the same page, and if you're willing to be open to an interruption, just remove the sign, and then that way they know they can come talk to you, and people will start to respect those boundaries. At first, they might be offended if they don't have boundaries for themselves, but people, you can train people, and hopefully they respect that. So did you set anything like that up? I know you live with dogs and a husband.
Yeah, in the workplace, what you were just talking about, it's funny when you make any kind of change that affects someone else's behavior, and in that case it's like they want to come talk to you, and so they feel like you slammed the door in their face. It's like there's normally kind of a negative reaction, unless, well, it helps if you talk to them first, and it's even more positive if you're like, hey, let's all do it together, right?
You can do it too.
But even with that pushback, that's normal. But when they start seeing the results you're getting,
Yeah.
Even the ones who make, I mean, some, you know, in the office, sometimes people straight up make fun of you, right? There's always that loudmouth guy that, you know, that could happen anyway. I know that guy. He's always there. But even those guys will usually eventually shut up and then start doing it. So you just got to hang in there and stick to your guns. It takes a while to change behavior, not only yours, but the people who are affected by it, to get out of that habit of what they were doing that was interrupting you. So you want to give it a little time and stick with it. For working at home, I was going to say with the red sign or the tiara are really nice visual cues if you have children.
Mm-hmm.
If you have, if you're able to have a day-to-day routine, then that's also super helpful for that. So my husband is like, he has an irregular schedule. So sometimes we have to move things around. That's where I do that Tetris with my time blocking so I can still get things done. And I found, like, in that situation, what's helpful is we kind of tag team in the morning and be like, okay, you know, this is my designated time that I'm doing this thing, and this is when we're going to do this. So if he just knows that I'm going to be available, it helps. And so it's setting expectations, I would just say, and not. So the last thing I would warn about is, like, it's really awesome when you're not getting interrupted, but it's your family. So if you abuse it and never take it off or turn it from red to green ever, or have some way for them to know when it is okay and you're a total workaholic, then it could lead to a problem. So you want to make sure that you're actually specifically turning it on and off appropriately to the task.
Yeah, absolutely. And while we go through all these hacks, one of the things that he mentions is, you know, being kind to yourself and having some compassion. So when we get a little deeper into some of these hacks, like, they're pretty stringent. And so if you're not, you know, if you try to implement it and you're not able to stick to it, just realize you can always try again tomorrow. And you know, don't beat yourself up so much about it. But especially when we get into the pre-commitment part and discuss that. So the next thing that he talks about is hacking back on emails.
Can I interrupt for a second? Because one thing, as guinea pigs this week, it's like, as far as this on the workspace thing, what did we both have to deal with? Dogs, right? And the dogs being the interruptions in the workspace because we're working from home. And so it's like, yeah, they can be trained, but they need to readjust. And then we also need to account for their little doggy needs around our schedule. So we're not.
Well, I have a schedule where I walk my dog. I'm pretty good, and, like, he knows it, you know, and I feel like he can tell. And if I'm on a call late in the afternoon, and as soon as I hang up, he's, like, sitting by the door ready. Like, he knows and he's ready to go. So I think I've gotten him trained pretty good about timing.
Mine are feral like my kids, so it's a little hard.
Yeah. So anyway, back to, so he discusses how to hack back emails. So again, another study in the International Journal of Information Management found that office workers took an average of 64 seconds after checking emails to reorient themselves and get back to work, which I thought was interesting, because if you think about the number of times that you would go and look at your email and go back and look at it, I mean, those minutes start to add up. And, you know, checking email is a very productive task when there's time set aside for it. Janine and I both, during this kind of guinea pig phase, we have been going over our schedules and figuring out what's going to work best for us, and, like, how and when we're going to do certain things. And I'd say it's still sort of in the works. And before we end the call, you know, before we end this, we'll go over kind of how we blocked our schedules. But there is time in our day where it says that we are going to have a comms check-in, and that comms check-in includes emails. And I don't really check email first thing in the morning. The first time I dive into email is after I walk my dog at about 12:30 Eastern. So I'll check emails, read them, and we'll get in a little bit more here in a minute about kind of how to deal with emails. But anyway, so he says to receive fewer emails, we need to send fewer emails. So the whole thing that he discusses is, one, to send less emails so you receive less emails. He also talks about, you know, unsubscribing from all those lists that you're on. Because listen, I know I'm on a million of them. So I'm actually in the process right now of creating filters in Gmail that will take those emails and take them right to a folder or a label. Because what I'm going to do is once I get them all sorted is I'm going to figure out which ones I actually want to read, and I'm going to unsubscribe from the rest of them. And another way to do this is you can actually create another Gmail account that you could use to sign up for different freebies and email lists and things like that. But he does recommend, unsubscribing from the ones that you don't want to receive emails from anymore. And then just to mention as a side note, as a service provider or someone that does marketing or, owns a business that wants to do marketing, it's really nice if you let people know what's coming up. So if you're all of a sudden one week going to start sending like an email every single day for 2 weeks because you're getting ready to launch something, it's good to give people a heads up about that so that people don't all of a sudden get inundated with emails from you and then get irritated and unsubscribe when really it's just a 2-week period that you're just trying to get their attention about something. So just on both sides of it. But I'm personally, I'm going through right now, going through my emails, I'm sorting through them, getting them into the labels, and I'm actually filtering them so that they never go into the inbox. They go straight to, because there's a way to send them straight into a label, and then I'll go through those labels once I've got it all sorted and determine which ones I want and don't want. But did you set something like that up in your email?
Actually, that I was going to say that's a great task for a VA
I'm working with a VA to get it done. Yeah.
Because I don't even want to deal with that. I'm not a fan of email. And I tell you, when I went to Iraq for a year and then came back, they didn't turn off my clinic and hospital notifications. And it was this old school email thing where you could only delete one email at a time. And I had thousands and thousands of emails. But now, and that was, okay, I'm old, right? So that was back in the early days, but it's easy. It's like how many times I've seen some of my friends go on there. It's like they're in the 50 to 70,000s when they're clearing out their email box, just getting it VA and cleaning it all up and getting rid of it. It can get super crazy, but yeah, the filters for sure. I love his play tactic. Never thought about if you send something out on Friday, you're stressing out your whole team because now they have that open loop for the weekend, right? And they don't
or anyone. Yeah, he says about delaying when you send emails. So Gmail has it. There's one called Max, I think it's called, that you can get for Gmail. It's like an add-on in Gmail that helps you manage, and you can delay sending. But I think Gmail actually has a setting where you can delay it. I also have something I use called Boomerang, which if I get something that's important, but it's on a Friday and I know I'm not going to deal with it until Monday, I click Boomerang and it'll remove the email from my inbox and send it to me send it back to me. So it goes to the top of my inbox whenever I want it. So I could send it for like Monday morning, at 8 a.m. if that's when I'm going to deal with it, or noon, or whenever my email time is that's blocked off on my calendar. So it's called Boomerang, and it's just an addition that you can put. It's free up to a certain amount of boomerangs, and then you have to pay for it, but it's very inexpensive. But I really love it because it allows me to kind of take it out of the inbox. It's out of my mind. I don't have to worry about it. I know it'll come back. But similarly, he talks about delaying an email. He says respond to the email so it's off your plate, but delay it to the last possible time when you can actually send it to someone or when they need the reply. Versus if you send it to them on a Friday afternoon, they're going to feel like they're going to need to respond, or you're going to get it like late Friday night, then you're going to feel like you need to respond. And then it's this ping pong back and forth when you don't even really want to deal with it. So just wait, get off your plate, schedule it, and then it'll send out all by itself, and then you're done.
Yeah. And this all ties into how the brain actually works, right? The whole taking 62 seconds to get back after checking an email. It's like, that's why texting and driving is bad. Our brains can only think about one thing at a time, and it can't switch tasks any faster than every 2 seconds. And so when you're driving, a 2-second delay can kill you when you're looking at a phone, right? But it's the same thing. You check an email and your brain needs time to reorient.
Yeah. So one of the other things I do is in my Gmail, you can create a task that's inside of Gmail. So it's this little list that sits on the side of my my inbox when I open it, not on mobile, on desktop. And so if there's an email that I know that I want to read during my time, like my reading time, that I have set aside for like reading articles and emails, I'll just move it to that task list, and it just lives there. Now I know I won't forget it because it's living there. Nir, he recommends, once you have your inbox clean, what he does, like the first thing in the morning, he said while he's drinking his coffee, is he'll tag, he uses 2 tags. One is today or this week. And what he'll do is he'll tag it with today or this week, meaning he can get to it any other time this week. And he'll just use those 2 tags to tag emails in his inbox to say whether he's going to respond or do whatever he needs to with the email. So one extreme example of this is Dan Kennedy in his fantastic time management book, which I love. He actually doesn't deal with email at all. He gets correspondence sent to him once a week from his assistant in a box, FedEx to him, snail mail to him once a week. He responds to everything, sends it back to her, and then she sends it out to whoever is getting it. So people really, they know that he tells people up front, listen, don't expect a reply for like 14 days because this is how I do it. And he sticks to it. He doesn't do email. He doesn't, deal with any of it. That's what's in his book. I don't know if he's changed his process since, but that's how he does business. And people know that and respect it. And the other thing is I feel like people will fill the space that you give them like water, right? So if you give them this time frame, like this is what I have, I will respond to emails on these days, then they know that they need to be prepared. So whatever 10 things that they need to say to you, they need to get it together, put it in put it in a letter and send it to you. And then he'll respond, and usually you'll get response back in like 14 days, something like that.
And it's expectation management, right? Yeah. If they know, they're not going to get cranky about it. It doesn't matter if it's 4 minutes or 4 hours or 4 days. If they know, then they can relax knowing that, and you have to stick to whatever it is you set.
Yeah. So one of the other things that Nir recommends is booking a 15-minute call. So he has office hours. So what he'll do is he'll respond to someone's email and he'll say, hey, I got your email. If you're free, I have 15 minutes available at this time. And give them a link to book a call and just say, we can discuss it, versus this ping pong back and forth of emails, which I really love because I actually hate email. In our team, we do everything we can to stay away from email. We even tell clients. So all of our messaging, especially around tasks, is in our project management tool. And we use Slack, which I think that for having the group chat, and we will address group chat, we keep it pretty constrained to, morning messages, afternoon messages, if there needs to be direct messages, but we don't have this expectation that they need to respond right away. And, we give them time. If I haven't heard from them within, 24 hours of sending the message, I might be looking for a response, but I give them time, just like I expect them to give me time to respond. I don't always see everything right away because I have specific times when I have right on my calendar, it says comms check. I check Slack, I check Messenger, I check my emails, all that stuff during that time, or text messages, or Voxer. Look, we got all these. I have different people that message me in different places, but I don't check them all the time. I only check them certain times a day. So that's emails. If you have questions about them, he really gives great examples and very actionable steps on how to get control of email. And that's just one part of it. So did you have anything else to add about emails before I move on?
No, not about emails.
Okay. So now we're going to talk about how to hack back group chat. So the first thing, I'm going to go over the rules first that he gives us rules. And the first rule is use it like a sauna. Stay a while, then get out. It's unhealthy to stay too long. Rule number 2, schedule it. Rule number 3, be picky. And rule number 4 is use it selectively. So I really love this. So the example he gives is no one wants to be on a conference call that lasts all day long where people are just sort of meandering in and out and commenting and saying, hey, what's up and whatever. I mean, that's super distracting, right? So use it like a sauna. Check it when you have scheduled time, but then get out of it. If you start to have these like long lines of emojis and responding and these comment threads next to you, I mean, it gets out of hand. So I do this thing in ours. So if I've read someone's message, I don't necessarily need to respond, but I've read it only during my scheduled time. There's a little check mark a little check mark emoji, and I use that. So they know I've seen it. I appreciate that they sent it. I've seen it. And then, you know, if it requires a response and I have the time blocked and I'm in that time block and I can respond, then I'll do that. If not, they know that I've seen it and I'm done and I just leave it. And so then that's the get in and get out, right, of the group chat. Schedule it. So schedule your time to respond to messages, and then making sure your team's on the same page, right? Like if you want your team to respect your boundaries, you need to respect your team's boundaries as well. So making sure everyone's on the same page of what the expectation is about when to, you know, the time that you need to respond to messages. So if you expect a response within 30 minutes, I would put that in the message, but I would also understand that then they're probably going to expect you to be responding within 30 minutes to their message. So, you know, I would say give them some time and ask them, so when do you check messages? When do you want to check messages? That way you know when you should send it. So if you know that they're checking it at 8 a.m., noon, 4 p.m., then you know to send messages in those times. And if there's, you know, an extenuating circumstance, then you need to schedule a meeting or a time to talk outside of that. But having that expectation, again, the setting expectations.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea when you're doing this to take an inventory of how urgent is urgent, really, right? Because we tend to feel, he talks a lot about the feelings of urgency we get when we see that thing, we want to respond to it, but it may not be that necessary at all, you know, well, not at all, but I mean, where we're like, oh, minutes and hours is like, oh, if I can get it off my plate. But some of these things, like, they don't need to be answered that fast. You know, it depends on your business. Some have things that do require immediate action. And there are other things that literally, if you're on, you know, this 6-month sales cycle and some of your activities just kind of arbitrary deadlines, right, need to be done in a certain period of time. It's like, it doesn't necessarily require an answer that day. Still, you want to set an expectation, but you can take that stress off yourself.
Yeah. And it's about, so determining what needs a meeting and what doesn't, which we're going to talk about hacking back meetings. So there's a difference between topics that can be discussed in the project management tool, topics that can be discussed in the communication tool, so Slack, and then things that need a meeting, right? There needs to be a level of priority. You know, and if you are going to do daily meetings, right, there needs to be specific things that need to be addressed in there, and anything beyond that needs a separate meeting that needs to be scheduled. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But, you know, understanding that the group chat platform and what it needs to be used for, and setting that expectation across the team.
Yeah. And just as we segue into meetings, one similarity between group chat and meetings, or a rule that I think is super important, that anybody who doesn't need to be there shouldn't be there.
Picky.
And so that's why the group chat tools, where you can break it, your group, it doesn't have to be all the group all the time. And then then it defeats the purpose of where certain messages get lost because there's too many people in one channel.
Yeah. So that's the number 3 rules: be picky, determine who needs to be involved and only invite them. Then use it selectively. So like we were just saying, topics that are not important or sensitive, those kinds of topics need to be addressed in a meeting. If you work remotely, they need to be by video. And if you're in person, they need to be an in-person meeting, but you'll have to determine what that platform looks like for you. But okay, so hacking back meetings. So one of the things that I think is so important that he mentions is being present in body and mind. So a lot of people are starting to use video calls, maybe that aren't used to using them. And let me just tell you, people know when you are doing something else, even though you're on video chat. You cannot be working on something and talking to someone, because they know. It is noticeable, okay? Put your phone down, you know, get off Facebook, like whatever, be present. Like it, to me, I feel like that's like one of my biggest pet peeves, is like talking to someone and then them not like talking to me because they're distracted. Like, I just feel like, and people can tell, like in person, obviously people can tell, but even on video chat, you can still tell. And so his big thing is like, put your phone down. One thing I do is when I'm on a call with someone and I'm going to take notes, I will say to them, listen, just so you know, when if I look down or if you hear me typing, I'm taking notes, just so you know, so they know what I'm doing versus them thinking I'm like reviewing Facebook or something, right? Or working on something else. I will let them know. I do that a lot. Like with discovery calls, I might take a note. Hey, just so you know, if I look down, I'm writing, versus them thinking I'm just like looking at my phone and not paying attention to what they're saying. And if I need to take a note and I'm trying to write something, I will tell them, hey, I'm just going to write that down really quick. I don't want to forget that, or something like that. I could record the call and go back and watch it, but let's be honest, like I also need to make it work for my schedule. I'm not going to do that. So it's best for me, but I let them know up front so that they're not thinking I'm being rude,
Yeah. And they usually appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. And I make it a joke, like, just so you know, I'm not like playing on Facebook or, I make it a joke. And then another great thing, I love this. And I do this naturally, but I love this. He says for meetings, you should require the person that's going to hold the meeting to send out an agenda and create a brief, basically take a shot at the solution prior to the meeting. So they need to create like a little one page, if that's all it takes, or just a paragraph discussing the problem, their reasoning, and their solution or recommendation. And that needs to be sent out with the agenda so that the people that get on the meeting understand that they're going there to either they can get their thoughts together, either say, hey, I don't think that's going to work, or this will work. But if it's a brainstorming meeting, then it needs to be like, people need to do the work prior to, right? Like they need to come with their ideas already there, and then there can be a discussion, but there definitely needs to be a clear agenda. I think that's really important. And
well,
we started
it
doing
sets
that.
Their mind to be, they're more prepped to participate instead of kicking back and listen mode and then pay attention and look at their phone. If they're like, hey, this is what we're going to talk about, and I would like you to bring the suggestion.
Yeah. And we started doing that with our own meetings, where we have an agenda and we say, these are the topics we're going to discuss, and we check them off as we go. We create any tasks that need to come from them, but it keeps us a lot more organized than just feeling like we're just hanging out, which, I mean, we hang out sometimes on Zoom, but not when we're trying to do business, right?
Yeah. Well, like I love our quarterly, monthly, weekly strategy and our daily huddles, but they go super fast and we're done. It's like, so it sounds weird to say, it's like there's almost no reason to have, I default to no for a meeting unless there's a super reason to have one, but our system for that keeps us super efficient and on point. But they're brief and you get to the point right away.
Absolutely. And that when you're if it's a quick meeting and someone needs to meet outside of it separately, then they need to do that outside the meeting. And if the meeting, like the expectation of the meeting should be just, made, everyone that's attending it should understand, is this brainstorming or is this just a review of something? Like whatever that might be, it needs to be set up front. So if it's not a meeting where issues are going to be discussed or solved, it needs to be said so that if someone does have an issue and maybe it's just something they can do one-on-one with someone else, that needs to be done separately, and that expectation needs to be set up front for sure.
One of my favorite quotes from a division surgeon, when he came in, he was a gentleman I'd worked with before, and then we ended up in the same division in a different assignment. And at the first meeting, he said, there's nothing I hate more than walking out of a meeting going, wow, that was a lot of great discussion, right? It's like, and what's super genius about the person who's calling the meeting having to not only have a brief for everyone and a purpose, but suggested solutions to whatever it is they think they need the meeting for, by setting that requirement in front of them, you're eliminating meetings that they may have called because I don't know why, but there are people who just, it's like they identify the problem and then they get stuck there and they don't get into problem solving mode. They think they need the meeting to solve the problem. And if you tell them no, they have to go, it essentially makes them think that next step, and you can eliminate the need for a lot of meetings.
Yeah. Okay. So the next one is hack back your smartphone. All right. So this one I found a little difficult. So he has 4 phases: remove, replace, rearrange, reclaim. So remove is remove unused apps. Replace is replace certain things that you would normally use your phone for, but replace with something else. So he describes a watch, which I don't have it on today, but I did start wearing a watch last week when I went through my phone. I didn't go quite as crazy as he did, but then I'll explain what I did. But I started wearing a watch. I didn't put on today. It's just, I need to get into the habit of doing it, because instead of me looking at my phone for the time, I can just look at my watch, right? Rearrange. So put apps. So he has 3 categories: primary tools, aspirations, and slot machines. And I'll go over those in a minute. And then reclaim. So reclaim your time and your attention. So remove the unused apps. So I went through my apps and I had a lot, and I removed a lot of them. I didn't remove all of them. So he went in and removed like all social media. I did not do that. Janine, did you remove all your social media apps?
I didn't, but I am not a fan. It's like, I don't naturally tend to use it, and I leave it on there because for me, it's a work tool. So that wasn't a problem. Is it?
So what I did do is rearrange. So his 3 categories are primary tools, aspirations, and slot machines. So primary tools are like things that are used to get a task done. So email, he had the calendar, any of his messaging apps, they were on his home screen. The aspirations are like your exercise apps or your meditation apps, things that you aspire to do, yoga apps, things like that. And then the slot machines are like the things that you can get lost in. That's what he calls them. So what I did is I actually split my phone up, and I have like my primary tools, which are like messaging, email, calendar, weather, those kinds of things are my first one. Then if I scroll to my next page, it's my work app. So from my phone, I do a lot of things like we use Content Studio for social media posting. So I have that app. I have ClickUp app on my phone. So if I need to, I can work from my phone, if needed. Then the next one is my aspirations. So it has like my workout apps. It has my meditation apps that I use. And then I have to go through those 3 things to get to the social media, the shopping apps, those kinds of things. And I actually put them into the little boxes. So I actually have to like swipe 4 times, click on it, then click on like Facebook to be able to see it. So I've made it a little bit more difficult to get to it, and we'll get to what that is a little bit later, but I made it a little bit more difficult. So, and I'll tell you what, I've found that doing that, I've used it less. And then the last thing is turning off the notifications. So I went through and turned off all notifications. Like I can't see badges, the little red circle with the numbers. I turned all that off. So the only things I do get notifications for where I can see it when my phone is locked is messages and phone calls. Emails, I turned those off, so I can't see it. And that little red dot, turn that off for Facebook, all my social media, everything. I don't have little red dots, the little circles on any of my apps, with the exception of my messaging ones. That's it.
Yeah, I may have been a little more hardcore on that in terms of the phone. I've always taken a "you're not the boss of me" approach to my phone, even before there were cell phones, because like the phone is a tool for me. Yeah. And so it's like and I do a lot of outdoor stuff, and I do a lot of projects that work with my hands where I'm messy, right? And don't necessarily want to pick up my phone. So I don't have any qualms about setting down my phone and walking away. It's like the beauty of all these comms tools, the messaging and the everything else, is that you don't have to answer it right away, and then you don't know who called, right? Yeah. That's not a thing anymore.
Right.
Beautiful. And then I was about the phone calls. Oh yeah, just sometimes it's a problem, right, Amelie? Sometimes I walk away and I forget to pick it back up. Yeah. But it works with time blocking that way, right? It just makes it a complete distraction. I set it down. Some people get anxious when they don't feel it in their hands, even though they're not looking at it.
Well, I turn my phone over so I can't see the screen. So even if I do get a message while I'm doing something, it's turned over. So while I'm working, I use the Pomodoro Technique a lot, where I'll work for 30, 45 minutes at a time, then take a break. I'll turn my phone over so I can't see it. But notifications on my desktop too. I don't have any sound notifications on my laptop, nothing. I don't have sound notifications, and I don't have any little red circles because I don't like seeing them, and it does make me feel anxious. So like Slack is on my desktop, but I don't have any notifications on it. So I know that there might be messages, but I don't know and I don't care until I have time to look at it and when I've set time aside to do that. I also use the do not disturb setting a lot on my phone for that exact purpose.
I think that looking at it, that relative level of urgency of what really is urgent, because I mean, it's like, I'm a doctor, right? So it's like, listen, it's like, it has to involve blood that actually spurts or a broken bone that's sticking out of the requirements of what is actually urgent. And all of those things means that said call should be going to 911 and not to me, because I'm sitting at home working on something else, not doing that. So it's like, what is an emergent? It's like, it's probably not actually, it might be just stirring up those feelings, but they're not actually proportionate to what's going on.
Awesome. So for me, the phone thing's been great. Actually, since I've removed all the notifications, it's been awesome, because a lot of those, like, I don't even need to see them. They don't matter. And as I'm turning off the notifications, I'm realizing that maybe some of those apps I thought I needed, I don't really need. And so I've actually, since I went through my phone the first time last week, I've gone through a couple times and deleted some more apps, because it's like, I don't really need this. I don't even use it. Like, I don't know why I was acting like, and if I ever want it again, I can just download it. I don't know why, it's not good to hoard apps. Okay. Okay, so the next hack is hack back your desktop. So this took me a while, but I got it done. He didn't do this. So in the book, he says just clear out your whole desktop, and he put everything into like one folder. Okay, I could not do that. So I went through my desktop and I organized everything into my documents, like all the different crap that I had on there. I deleted a bunch of old screenshots of things and things I downloaded. I went through all that stuff. So now my desktop is clear with the exception of 2 folders, one that says today and then one that says this week. So if anything I need that is relative to something I'm working on today will go into that folder. And if it doesn't, then it's empty. There's nothing in it. Maybe it goes into this week, meaning I'll get to it later in the week or something like that. Everything else is off my desktop, both on my desktop computer and my laptop. I cleaned everything out. He didn't do that. He just dumped everything into one folder, which that I couldn't do that. I had to organize it. And it's actually kind of great to like look at my desktop and it's all clean. There's no like overlapping icons, which seriously irritated me looking at that. What about you? Did you do that?
I actually do the periodic take everything, because I'm a work in progress. And so I will get that new computer and like, no, I'm just, usually I would start out with just, 3 or 4 folders of whatever my active projects were. So just for convenience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, over time, entropy, and it turns into a mess. And then I would just wrap it all up into a folder and I would just call it like desktop and the date. Just so I would know, but most of the time I never do go looking back. I find everything I need by searching it, so it doesn't matter to me like what.
Right, you use the search tool. I don't use that as much, but maybe I need to start using it.
Well, but maybe I need to keep my stuff cleaned up and organized.
Yeah,
right?
maybe. But he talks about your line of sight. So if your line of sight is cluttered, it distracts you from what you're working on.
I was going to say, yeah, for sure that makes a difference, because once it's off of there, then it's a glorious thing. And then what I just threw on my real thing, it's like more than that, is my browser tab shame, right? It's like covering up my desktop shame. So my desktop shame never really bothered me.
Mm-hmm. So I use OneTab, the Chrome extension OneTab, and I love it. So when I need to work on something, like specifically I'm working on one thing and I don't want to see anything else, I hit OneTab, it closes all the tabs I've been working on and it saves them. So I can go back and get those tabs later. So like when I'm, so today I promoted our podcast. I put our podcast out everywhere and do all those things. So I only open what I need. So when I went in this morning, I had all my tabs open from yesterday of whatever I was doing. So I closed all of them and I just opened up the ones I need. And I just work in there. And then when I'm done, I can either close out or I can just hit OneTab again and it closes all. I love it. Love OneTab. It's seriously the best thing. And it's also really good when you're getting ready to do like a presentation where you're going to share your screen and you don't want anybody to see all your tabs. Close all those bad boys and then you can find them later.
Mm-hmm.
So I do love that. Okay. So hack back online articles. So he talks about how He doesn't normally read articles on his desktop, but he'll read them on his phone. I'm really similar in that way, where I usually don't read them on my desktop, but I will read them on my phone during my time where I have for reading articles and things like that. So something that we took, I mean, I've always had it, but I didn't have the process that he used. So Janine and I started to implement that. And what it is we have the Pocket Chrome extension. We also have the app on our phone. I don't know, I think you have it too. I have the app on my phone. And so if I find something, I just save it. They have little labels and you can label what it is. Then I can go back and read it. And then if I think it's important to share on social media or write a post about or a blog post, I'll take it and put it into ClickUp. In our content idea, we have a kind of a dump list for our content ideas. And that way, when we're looking for content, we can go there, and inside there, it'll have the link to it and all of that. So and then in my email, if there's an email I want to read, I talked about how I put that in my to-do list. And once I read it, if it's something I've determined that I want, that it should be a post, or, you know, we can turn it into a blog post, something like that, my ClickUp is connected to my email. So all I have to do is hit the little ClickUp button right there, and it'll create a task right inside of ClickUp in our content idea list. And so then I can go back and read it. And that way I don't feel like, oh, I need to read this right now, and then I don't read it, but I really wanted to. So save it in Pocket. So his thing about that is save it somewhere so you can go back and read it when you have the time scheduled for it. And then another thing that I was doing, and I didn't realize that it was this, but he calls it multi-channel multitasking. So this is an example of like reading while you're walking, or listening to an audiobook while you're on the treadmill or walking or running or something like that. And there are some studies that show that this is actually an effective way to get people to do something that maybe they is a less desirable thing. So like going to the gym, they did this study and they gave people preloaded audiobooks of I forget the name of the books now, but anyway, they had 2 books loaded on there, and people actually went to the gym more. It was like 40% more for the people that had the audio books, because it like gave them some excitement, and they gave them books that were like, you know, that were good and had like cliffhangers and things like that. So I do this. When I walk my dog, even if I'm just going for the short afternoon walk, I take my headphones and my phone and I listen to my audiobook while I'm doing it. And it does actually make me want to walk longer, because if I'm getting to a good place in the book or something like that, I'll want to keep listening. Now, we obviously don't recommend walking down the street reading a book, but you know, if you're on your treadmill or something like that, you can do that. So what about you? So I know we set that up. Do you do the multi-channel multitasking ever?
I do when I need the flexibility, right, to do that. Otherwise, it's like I kind of prefer, it's like I think it mattered, like the subject matter, right? When I'm on the treadmill, it's like I don't want to be thinking about work stuff. It's like I like to keep those things separate.
Yeah.
So I'm more listening to music when I'm doing that than that. But it's the same thing. It's
well,
like
they were nonfiction books that they put on there. I really can't remember what the name of the books were that they gave.
Yeah, if it were something, but like he said, you know, it's something they like, and it's got clips.
Yeah, and it gets them excited.
It just kind of keeps you going. It's like, then that catches your interest. So I think the subject matter probably.
Yeah. But I do set aside time to read articles, so that way I actually get to them, and I'm honest with myself, like, am I actually going to read this one? And if not, then I just don't even put it on the list. You know,
that whole using Pocket and everything else, like it can be a trap. If you're not going to read the stuff, you don't need to be, you know, it's like you're wasting your time surfing for articles if you're never going to get the information out of them that you need.
Yeah.
So if you're going to set aside the time, you need to keep up with your industry and keep your knowledge and experience. This is the information age, but designate the time. I would designate the time for surfing, and I would designate the time for reading, and I would keep those 2 separate, because otherwise.
And I feel like the surfing is like towards the end of the day when, you know, you've used up all your brain power, and the reading is like, you know, maybe earlier in the day when you're really going to take something from it, or maybe just one day a week or something like that. So for me, I use Mondays for reading prior to getting on client calls. That way it just kind of inspires me for the week, and I read a bunch of, you know, what's going on in the industry. So I dedicate Mondays to doing a bunch of reading of articles that I've saved. And anyway, it works for me.
Well,
So
and the brain power thing is super important, right? Not only, it's like I call them I do my brain dead things towards the end of the day,
right.
and just your cycle through the day. Like, don't ask me to do anything at 2 PM. I don't know what
Yeah.
it's about 2 PM, but that's my lull before I catch my second wind. And
Yeah. Yeah.
nothing good is happening then.
Definitely. Okay, so the next one is hackback feeds. Okay, so he talks about the feeds on Facebook, on LinkedIn, Twitter, all the different social media feeds that we have, Reddit, all of those. So he mentioned 2 tools. Now, I've never used any of these, and I haven't used them yet because I find that during my social media time, I actually don't mind seeing the feeds. But for people that want to tame that, he recommends one called To Do Book or Newsfeed Eradicator. And what they'll do is they'll actually, one of them puts up like an inspirational quote instead of the Facebook newsfeed. And then another one, you can't see the feed. So you can actually go into Facebook, but you won't see the feed. So you could see the messages and things like that versus seeing all the things going on, all the other external triggers. For me, I don't think it's something that I need to do because when I go on Facebook, I do want to see the feed, or go on LinkedIn or something like that. So one of the things he recommended is he has a Chrome extension called Open Multiple Websites. And so what he does is he presets in, so when you type in like linkedin.com, it takes you to the news feed. But what he does is he pulled the URL for messages and put that, he preset, so in Open Multiple Websites, that Chrome extension, you can preset the links that you want it to open. He clicks it, it'll open up the link. So like for his Twitter account, it'll open up his messages, and LinkedIn will open his messages. So during his time of social media, he can just go straight to the messages versus seeing the news feed first and like getting lost in it. But like I said, for me, when I go on it, when I designate time for social media, I want to see the news feed. So for me, it's fine. And then another thing he recommended, so he actually sets time aside to watch YouTube videos, but YouTube's really smart about this because they have the little thumbnails of the next videos or similar videos. So that's why like it's super easy to binge watch those. I mean, they get you with that one, right? Mm-hmm. So he actually sets aside time to watch YouTube videos, and he uses an extension called DFTube, which removes the thumbnails, and so he can watch it without any external triggers. So if that's an issue for you, you may want to look into that, but I don't find myself really needing that sort of thing. Like I said, I don't mind being on the feed. What about you? Did you implement any of those things?
Well, one of the things I was going to say when he's talking about the messaging, it's like all these social media things also have these messaging things. And I like to tell people, it's like, okay, if you friend me or we connect or whatever, it's like, okay, but if you actually want to reach me, this is where to reach me. Mm-hmm. I don't go to those. I don't like having 10 channels of communication that are normal, right? Mm-hmm. For ongoing things. It's like I try to move those on into the place where I want to conduct my conversation.
Yeah, awesome. So those are just some tools. And I'll grab the links for those and put them in the comments. So if you want to check them out, you can. But like I said, of all the hacks, I really implemented most of them with the exception of the feeds one, just because, like I said, I don't feel like it, I don't necessarily go on social media when I don't want to see the news feed. So, but if you have trouble, with that, definitely, look into it, and we'll put the link to that in the comments.
All these time sucks. It's like, it's interesting though, because the hacks that it's like I think anyone will find some things that they've naturally done, and other things where it's like, oh man, it's like, I really need help with that. Or, oh, this is super genius. Yeah. Some of his stuff is just, it's super genius. Sure. And even though it is, and you need it, it's interesting how it's hard to get habits to change, right? And you have to fight that even though you want it.
And that's the next thing we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about what he calls the pre-commitments. Just, we want to reiterate that, like, you need to be kind of kind to yourself and give yourself some grace that as you start to implement these things or try a new schedule, like, I feel like the schedule's kind of an ever evolving thing. And I mean, I'm constantly changing it. So if we've implemented one way of doing something and it doesn't work, you're gonna have to change it, because you have to make it so it works for you, and makes it easy, so you can follow it. But if you mess up for a day, then that's okay. Like, just move on to the next day. You can always start again. So he talks about pre-commitments, and he has 3 different ones. The first one is the effort pact. And so this is the increase the amount of effort required to perform an undesirable action. So this is in the case where you want to make it more difficult for yourself to do something that you want to do less of, right? So his example was this like food jar or food container that has a timer on it. I had never even heard of this thing, but it's called Kitchen Safe, I think. And it has a timer on it, and you set the timer and you can't open it until the timer's up to keep you from eating whatever it is you want to eat. So that's an example of making it, harder to get to the food that you don't want to eat, right? So he listed out some examples of some apps. One is called Self-Control app, Freedom app, where it will block unwanted distractions, notifications, and websites. The one that he likes the best is called Forest app. I thought this was hilarious. So you set a timer and a little seed will be planted. And then if you switch off the app or like try to go to another thing like outside the app, the tree dies. I thought it was so funny.
It works both ways.
Right. I thought it was really funny. So for me personally, using the Pomodoro technique is how I do that. So I set the timer on my phone, and I'll turn my phone upside down so I can't see it. And I've already gotten rid of all my notifications, so I don't see any of those. I don't have any of the things popping up on my screen or anything like that. So I might check out the Forest app. I think it's kind of funny. But if you have issues with not being able to control yourself from going to certain websites or something like that, you might want to check out Freedom app or Self-Control app, or maybe the Forest app. And then your tree will die if you go get distracted. And I didn't know this, but Apple and Android both have Apple has something called downtime function, which will block certain access to certain apps on your phone. And then if you try to move off of it to do something else, you have to take an extra step to confirm that you want to break the pact. So I think that's kind of interesting. And it's good because it gives you that like few seconds to, okay, do I really want to be distracted right now? Because then maybe you'll change your mind. So, and then Android has something called digital well-being functions. So he recommends, taking advantage of those. And another one he recommends is making effort pacts with someone or like co-working. And I actually did this. I coached for someone's coaching program, and I ran co-working sessions in using the Pomodoro technique. I used to do it with friends as well. I'm in a group of women that own their own businesses, and we used to do co-working sessions. One woman in particular, Greta, sometimes we'll do it on like a Saturday, where we'll set a timer, we'll mute and pause our, turn our cameras off, we'll work, and then I'll come back on and say, our 45 minutes is up or whatever. So he talks about making a pact with someone, because if that person is supposed to meet you and it, they're going, you're going to feel more accountable, and this will work with working out, anything like that, but working all the same, if you tell someone, okay, we're going to meet at this time to start a co-working session to work, and then we're going to, do this. And then there's also something called Focus Mate that'll actually match you up with someone via a one-on-one video conference call to do that. You and I have done some co-working. What do you think? Have you used any of those apps, the Freedom app or Self-Control app?
Any of those apps, but I was going to say co-working is like for sure just the accountability in general. It's like, and it doesn't necessarily have to be live, but just to designate the fact that I have to, it's like, I hate not having something done and having to tell somebody.
Yes, right? It's horrible. Sometimes Janine will just text me that she did something, and I'm like, okay. I didn't even know it was on the list, but okay.
Oftentimes on my end when I'm texting, it's not like, oh, hey, Amelie, I did it. It's like, I finally done, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But definitely, I think it's important. The effort pact, I think, is important. And for me, the Pomodoro technique, and doing the co-working really helped. When I have the time, trying to match people's schedules up sometimes can be difficult. But for me, just setting a timer, like I'm working against the clock, is enough, for me to sit down and really be focused.
I use that. I like that because to me, it's a game. It's not as stressful. It's like, ooh, how can I beat it, right?
Yeah,
Or
like
how
what
much
can I get done? And yeah.
It's like, oh, I got to beat myself and then to me, it's like when I do that, it's like, then I usually find I'm free and wild earlier in the day than I would have been if I were just knocking the list. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so the next one is called a price pact. So this one's a little more extreme. And so he gave an example that he wanted to, he was trying to lose weight and he wanted to work out for it was 2 weeks in a row. And so what he did was he taped $100 bill to his calendar and set a lighter near it. And it was burn or burn. So he either burned the calories or he had to burn the $100 bill and to hold himself accountable. And it might seem a little extreme, but I think that for some people it might work. There was another one. He said that if he didn't finish his manuscript or something like that, he had to pay someone $10,000. And so obviously he finished it because he said the thought of paying someone $10,000 made him sick. So it pushed him to do it. And I'm just opening up my book because I want to go over the pitfalls because I think they're really important. These are not good for changing behaviors with external triggers you can't escape. Okay.
That's super important.
Yeah. And they should only be used for short-term tasks. And you need to be aware that entering a price pact can be scary, and they aren't for people who beat themselves up. So if you are the type of person that you're not able to let things go and you needed to burn that $100 bill and you were going to be angry at yourself for the next week, this is not a good idea for you. But if you can let it go and you burn that $100 because you decided not to go to the gym, then, this might work for you. And not all these things are going to work for everybody. But I definitely like the price pact where, and I think it has to work in the way that it's to avoid loss versus a gain. So you want to avoid having to give something away versus gaining something. So the trick of oh, if I do this for 5 days, I'm going to buy myself something, but it has to be a loss. So if you partner up and I'm like, Janine, all right, if I don't get this done, I'm paying you $10,000. Let me tell you, I will get that done.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just keeping that in mind too. But if you're looking for a motivator and this seems like it could work for you, I don't know. What about you? Do you think you could do something like this?
I was going to say there are apps when he talks about the weight loss, there are ones where it's like you're essentially betting, I'm based on your own, you get to set your own, or they have it has to somewhere in there's an algorithm that works, but you get to set, it's like, well, I'm going to bet $50 that I can lose this much weight in this many weeks or months or whatever. And then it gives you, it's like, if you actually do it, you get more than your $50 back. And if you don't, then
you lose it.
Yeah. And what he talks about, you think you're going to get to it about the deposit thing. It's like you have to earn it back. You already paid the $50. It's gone. And if you don't do it, then there's that. I was gonna say there's also, I don't know if you follow Mark and Gail of Authority Hacker Pro, but Mark has somebody where his thing is if he doesn't get it, he designates an amount that he has to donate to a charity that he totally disagrees with whatever it is that they do. And so, because that just makes him super mad, right? Yeah. And so if he doesn't do it, then he has to donate to the charity that he hates.
Oh, nice. That's pretty good. I didn't hear about that. That's pretty good. So, okay. So that was the price pact. So then the last one is the identity pact. And I think this is really important. So he basically, he explains, I think he uses being a vegetarian as an example, and that once he took on the identity of a vegetarian, him not eating meat seemed less important because he took on the identity of a vegetarian. Whereas before, like when he was sort of like just not eating meat, but not really saying it or taking on the identity, he was like, oh, I'm missing out on this. I'm not doing this anymore. So what he recommends is take on the identity that you're indistractable. Like people cannot distract you. You have all the things in place. You cannot be distracted, and take that identity on, and that will help. You know, if you call yourself and believe yourself to be indistractable, it will help for you to actually be indistractable. But again, if you become distracted, recognize it, try to understand the root cause of it from the first, recording that, or the first live that we did. Try to understand the root. Why do you want to be distracted by this? Like, what's going on? What's happening that you're trying to avoid? Like, what are you trying to avoid right now? And that'll help you to be more indistractable. So I don't know, did you have anything to add for the identity?
I was going to say that the whole, around taking on that identity, it's like that's what especially elite and pro athletes do. I mean, they are athletes already, but they own that, right?
Yeah.
And that's what they're constantly in visualization techniques for things. It's like you're literally visualizing, that how with all of your senses, how it sees, how it looks, smells, sounds, feels, everything.
Yeah.
And also emotionally how it feels with that identity, right? And it's soon, and the more you do that, it happens faster.
Yeah, definitely. So those are all the hacks and the packs that he talks about. I know this is a lot longer than we had anticipated, but we're going to actually make this a 4-part series because we realized that we had a lot more to say about these topics. So next time we are going to talk about making your workplace indistractable and raising indistractable children. So we are going to discuss those topics next time. So that'll be next Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern. And if you have any comments, questions about this, please put them in the comments. We will get back with you. We'll be back live next week. And give us a hashtag replay if you do watch the replay. We really appreciate you watching. We know this was a long one, but we think it's really important. And get the book. There it is. Get the book.
Yeah,
if you need help implementing this, or you're looking for some sort of, coaching, some not necessarily coaching, but just some mentoring or getting some help to implement these, figure out what's best for you. You need some feedback, sounding board, reach out to us. We have some 30-minute and 1-hour calls that we can offer you. So let us know if there's any way we can support, and we really appreciate it. We'll be back next week. We'll see you then. Hopefully you have a great weekend. All right. Bye.
Bye.